take the time to look at this morning. So you create the extension, give it a name. That name will be used when you make a call for the caller ID. Now there's certain devices that you're going to need if you have the requirement for video. You're going to need to enable the video codec. Okay, so let's take a look. Over the right hand side, you'll see a column here called codecs. And anytime you see an underscore like this, you can click on it. It's going to take you to a new page. Okay, so if I'm configuring a like a door station, I'm going to click on this codec link for this extension 303. And you can see the voice codecs that are available. In this case, G.711 will be the first choice for voice. And then down at the bottom, you can see where I have enabled the H.264 video codec. There's 3 video codecs. By default, they will be disabled. Okay, and so you're going to want to, if they're doing video, you need to enable the video codec. Those video codecs, they create some additional overhead, so by default they're all turned off if they're not needed. All right, so just keep that in mind because the video will not work. Again, the video is not going to happen unless you get the video codec enabled. All right, so configured some basic extensions. All right, and then you need to go to the actual IP line where those extensions, where those devices will be configured. So, for example, IP line 10, IP line 11, 12. I can click on any one of these links. It'll take me right to it. Or we can go to up the top left, you'll see the interfaces tab, the menu. So I click on that and I go to IP lines at the top. So this is QX200, so you can see all the IP lines that are available to me. I've got 200 IP lines that are available. Some of these aren't enabled yet. They would be enabled with a software license key. Currently, I only have 64 IP lines enabled on this particular system. All right, if you're familiar with configuring phones, IP phones, you know it's very easy to do with this system. We have the plug and play where you can just connect the phone to the system. We recognize it. If I were to connect a new phone to the system, it would come up as extension 302. It's the first available IP line that's not in use, and it has an extension assigned to it. Okay, that's the plug and play portion. All right. The second method would be to actually select the IP line. Okay, for example, I click on IP line number 12. All right, so I go to the IP phone, choose the phone model, and you'll see a very extensive list of IP phones that we will configure. Okay, all these devices, all the different manufacturers that you can see out here, we're going to configure the phones from this list. All right, very extensive list. Even a lot of the older phones that are no longer supported by a lot of these manufacturers will still configure them to the system. All right, so this is called auto configuration. Okay, so you actually just choose whichever phone that you have. Then you put in the MAC address for that phone, and the line appearance, that's the number of simultaneous calls you'll be making. And then each phone requires a registration username and password, and you're going to see this is important. Okay, before the phone can originate a call, it needs to provide that username and password. It's a SIP registration username and password. Okay, and even though it just shows bullets there's a good strong password that we enable by default. Okay, you typically, when you're configuring a device like a Grandstream, in this case the 2110, You don't need to know what that password is. You don't even care about it. The reason being is we're going to create a configuration file. When this phone boots up, we're going to recognize the MAC address. We're going to create a configuration file and send that out to the phone. All right, and in that configuration, it's going to have that username and password in it. All right, well, it goes, obviously, we're not going, there's a lot of devices out here on this that are out there that you saw on that previous slide that we do not configure. Okay, we do not have a configuration file for those. Okay, so the way that you're going to configure those types of devices, and these again, these are going to be like various endpoints. Any device that has a SIP client on it, it'll work with the system. Okay, that's one of the nice things is we can bring all these different devices together. If it has a SIP client on it, the way you configure it is you just go to the IP line, select the IP line, choose the phone model, and at the very bottom of this list, you'll see other. That means any other device that's not on this list, you simply choose other. The MAC address gets grayed out, and then you're going to have a username and a password. In this case, you will need to know what that password is. All right, and to find that password, all you gotta do is click on this little password generator. Okay, then off to the right here, you're gonna see a list of various passwords. And if you're careful, you can highlight it, you can right click on it, you can copy it. That way you can save it. You don't have to worry about writing it down. But you need to choose it and select it. Okay, I select it. Actually, before I do that, sorry, I need to save this entry here. All right, so I saved the entry, and so we're looking at IP line number 12. All right, and I do need to know what that password is. So once again, I would simply give it a password that we know. I can highlight it, copy it, and then now I can select it. So that's what the password is set there, and be sure to save. Remember, the save button is always at the very bottom of every page. Okay, so don't forget to save your settings. So now I've got this username, local extension 302, and now I've got a password. Well, now I need to go into the device and manually enter that information. Okay, and it's not that difficult to do, as I'll show you. All right, I've got a couple devices I want to bring up, the interface to. All right, the first one, this is going to be a Fanville. Oops. A Fanville i20. And this is one of their door stations. They do have a wizard that would take you through setting it up. Okay, if I click on the wizard, it'll take me through some of the basic steps. The server address, there's the authentication username, LOC, it's short for local extension 304. And then that's where and you enter the password that I created. And the user is also local extension 304, and then you enable that registration. All right, let's see what it looks like in the actual settings. If I go to SIP line number 1 on this device, it shows that it is successfully registered, and I've already pre-configured these. So we won't have to do all these this morning. But here I've got the address. That's the LAN IP address of the system, 172.30.0.1, where the phone is the device is located on the LAN side of the system. This is the SIP server port of the QX. By default, it's 5060 unless you've changed it to something else. The authentication username, and then there's a password. Also make the SIP user the same. And then you've got a display name and enabled registration. All right, let's look at a couple other devices. Okay. Okay, this is a Leviton INDS1 door station. Okay, if I go to the phone settings, SIP, and again, you'll see the IP address, the port number. You put the IP address in there, a couple different places. 172.30.0.1, display name, local extension 300. There's the password. Then you define the codecs that are going to be used for both voice and video. All right, at that point, you save the settings, and it also will, it should work. There's a lot of settings for defining your outgoing call. I'm not going to get into all these outgoing calls, incoming calls, a lot of different menus. All right, lastly, let's just take a look at a 2N. At 2N, this is the Helios. Yeah, got to get the password right. All right, you can go to the services on this one, and you get the display name, local extension 303. There's the IP address. Again, you put the username and IP address a couple different places, and you enable the SIP registration. All right, and we're going to come back and look at this. There's some settings in here for making calls, video. We'll come back and I think we'll come back and take a look at this here as we go. All right, so that's how easy it is to configure these different endpoints. Okay, so the question is, at that point, did it register? Well, let's just take a quick look. If you go to status, system status, there's an IP lines registration tab. There's an IP lines registration tab which shows all the different endpoints that are registered, and you can see that yes, these have registered, and it specifies when the registration expires. All right, so let's go on. We're going to take a look at some call scenarios. Okay, and I know we've reviewed this on some of the other webinars that we've done, but just a quick review. Incoming calls can go to an auto tenant, or maybe to a receptionist, or maybe they're going to ring several phones. Okay, the simplest call that you can have is an incoming call on one of your FXO ports. Just click on the interfaces and go to FXO, and you can specify, for example, FXO1. When you receive that incoming call, whether it's going to go to an extension, there's a list of all your extensions, or whether it's going to go to the call routing table. And it's in the call routing table where you can specify some time and date type functions, and I'll show you that here briefly as well. All right, you can have, if it goes to, for example, like if it's going to ring several phones, you would bring that call into a virtual extension. Maybe this extension 250 would be a virtual extension that's going to ring several phones. And if it doesn't get answered, it's also going to be the general voicemail box for the office or school. All right, how do you configure the same for a SIP trunk? Okay, on our SIP trunks, you would configure, you just simply add the DID into the SIP address field. Okay, if I'm going to have a DID assigned to this auto tenant, we'll just do an edit on the auto tenant.